Welcome to Disability Clinic, where we take care of the inclusion impaired. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Van. I'm a Vietnamese woman with long dark hair wearing a green satiny blouse, sitting in front of a colorful bookshelf. Today, we're checking in with one of our agents in the field, Ben Matlin, author of Disability Pride, Dispatches from a Post-ADA World. Ben Matlin is a journalist and author. Born with spinal muscular atrophy, he is a lifelong wheelchair user. His work has appeared in the New York Times, the LA Times, Washington Post, USA Today, NPR, and many more. Most recently, he has given us his book, Disability Pride, not as a primer, but more as an overview of the evolution of the disability advocacy movement into modern times. Thank you so much for joining me, Ben. It's great to have you.
Thank you for inviting me. I will describe myself. I'm an old white guy with not quite enough graying hair, wearing a white button shirt, a dark brown jacket, a headset, glasses. Background is a bookshelf and assorted junk.
Oh, you deserve more than that. It's a lovely bookshelf piled with many books because you're very well read. I just want to check in with you. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I've been going through some medical stuff, and I don't know. I'm not sure I'm exactly 100%. I have a procedure coming up. I don't think it'll be too bad, but I'm sort of in the middle of this process that is unnerving. Happy to talk more about that, but
Yes.
otherwise I'm pretty good.
I'm sorry to hear that. That does sound stressful. And I appreciate you sharing, I don't want you to feel like you have to talk about personal, healthcare things. It's always personal, feeling vulnerable when you're ill and you have to go in. But at the same time, it's kind of part of life. So it's nice to just kind of embrace it sometimes, or at least try to accept that it's happening.
Not much choice about it, is there?
Yeah, that's what I always like to say is kind of like illness and disability. It's kind of an eventual thing for everybody, the common human experience.
And a lot of disabled folks like me have these interruptions, I guess you might say, these hospitalizations and bouts of illnesses and things maybe more frequently than non-disabled folks. I mean, people like me do, I hate to admit it, but do live with a high degree of vulnerability, which is, maddening. I don't want to admit that. I want to be a macho guy. But, facts are facts.
I think there is some macho-ness to kind of calling out some problems, and some injustices. You're 100% right. It's not easy to acknowledge that people with disabilities face significant inequities when seeking healthcare. Something that's so good, but also so frustrating. Like just recently in September of last year, the NIH declared people with disabilities a vulnerable health population.
Yes.
It was like, whoa, no kidding. Better late than never. But yeah, I definitely try to quote some of those statistics to my colleagues when I'm teaching them about disparities and disability, because people with disabilities and chronic illnesses, of course, they have higher levels of needs sometimes, accommodations, things people need to live. Because of such a negative experience with healthcare, medical gaslighting, trauma, it's kind of a negative cycle where why would you want to go to the doctors if you're not being treated well? And then that kind of doesn't help you use the system in a preventive way, and it's more reactive, and that gets even more expensive. Very uplifting start to the conversation. I want to ask you a question actually related to this. I mean, I want to get to your book because your book is amazing. Disability Pride, Dispatches from a Post-ADA World by Ben Matlin. Thank you for this book. I feel like it's not just a primer, kind of like you say in the book, it's more of an overview of the evolution of the advocacy movement. So it's really awesome to look back and see how far the movement has come. In your book's introduction, you give a lot of great highlights about how disability is breaking through fashion, media, and politics. Do you see healthcare as one of the next big industries that disability can break through?
Well, that would be nice. I hope so. I think most average folks assume that doctors' offices and hospitals are accessible, and nothing could be farther from the truth. They are not exempt from the ADA, and yet find an examination table with grab bars near it. Can't find them.
Or adjustable height?
Adjustable height. I mean, nobody has that. ASL interpreters, they're just not there. Clear masks, yes. For lip reading. It's beyond that. There are doctors who don't want to deal with people with disabilities, with pre-existing conditions. And, there are studies where people have been told, on the phone, sorry, we're booked up, not taking new patients. More dangerously, there are cases of people who have been injured or even died from medical negligence. It almost happened to me in December. I think I can talk about this now. Still kind of emotional. I I was in the hospital for a gastrointestinal infection. My wife stepped out to get a cup of coffee. At that moment, two folks came in the room, said they were going to check my skin for breakdowns. They checked my feet and my elbows, lifted up my head to check behind my ears, and it became hard for me to breathe because they lifted my head so that my breathing tube in my neck got squished. The airway was compressed
Oh
the
yeah,
way
your
they lifted
tracheostomy.
my head. Yeah.
Mhm.
Then they proceeded to roll me over and check the back, and my head fell into an even worse position.
Oh
And
my
I could not
goodness.
talk because my jaw was pressed up against the pillow. I was able finally to grunt a little, and they sort of
Mhm.
said, oh, don't worry, we're almost done. At that point, I passed out. I could
Oh
not
my
breathe.
gosh.
They must have freaked out. My oxygen level dropped. I don't know how low.
Oh, that's so scary.
My wife is getting coffee and she hears an announcement of a code blue in our room. So she, drops everything and tries to rush to me. There was a problem with her security badge. She finally made it to the room. They didn't want to let her in, but she insisted, and she knew to lift my neck to open the airway. I have a trach that can be opened, an unusual sort of trach, stoma stent it's called. Uh,
Mhm.
she knew to open that and suction it, and I came back.
Thank
Uh,
goodness.
but yeah, vulnerable. That easily I could have died.
And
Uh,
vulnerable too because no one around you, aside from your wife, was knowledgeable about how to quickly
right,
address the
right.
airway, which is like the ABC, that's number 1. I am so sorry that happened. That's
I mean, they use
unbelievable.
the ambu bag, so that helps. But they don't know how bodies like mine work, and I understand we're not all the same. You can't know every little thing about every patient. But a couple of weeks later, I had to go back for a little procedure. It almost happened again. And I'm saying, no, don't roll me. Not till my wife is here to check my head. No, no, they didn't listen. There is a lack of respect for what the patient says a lot of the time. And those of us who know our disabilities are the experts. We know what works for us and what doesn't. Any doctor or nurse or whatever provider who will ask me and listen to what I have to say and respect my intelligence about my situation, I like that. I will stick with that person. But it's kind of rare.
I wish it wasn't so rare, but I totally agree. I really appreciate you sharing that story as stressful and certainly anxiety-inducing that is. It takes sharing that type of perspective for healthcare providers to even realize that there's a problem. So I really admire and appreciate everyone who's been able to share these very traumatic experiences because we need to confront this type of thing. It happens way too often.
Yeah, even now, one option for me going forward is surgery, colorectal surgery. The surgeon does not want to do that, which I'm happy not to, but she said, you're a high risk patient. I swear, she said, I'm not even sure you would survive.
Ooh.
And I'm torn between take my situation, my vulnerabilities seriously, and the other hand, don't baby me. If
Mhm.
I need it, I need it. Don't be afraid to treat me to do something that has to be done. When I go for my yearly checkup, I'm just as glad that the doctor gives me a quick exam in my chair. I'm aware that I ought to get undressed and lie down and have him check everything out. But I'm lazy. When I was younger, I would do that. I would insist on it. But now it's like, God, that is a hassle. Maybe if the exam room were more accessible, I don't know.
I think
But
you're speaking to a reality of you have to adapt, right? If the healthcare system isn't perfect and far from it, it's inaccessible, there's some sacrifices that you have to be okay with. And like there's some you let slide and then there's some like not being listened to or, being babied. There are things that are unacceptable and there's things like,
yeah,
okay, yeah, I'm not going to get out of my chair.
yeah, well, obviously, if I felt something had to be seen, I would make the effort. But yeah, it's always a trade-off. Fortunately, as I said, there's a few doctors who do seem to respect my self-awareness and self-knowledge. I stick with them. I value that.
Doctors have trouble humanizing their own patients, especially when people have apparent disabilities, but even people who appear non-disabled or able-bodied, I think the way doctors are trained, it kind of pathologizes things, we have to learn about all these different diseases and illnesses, and that's how we see things, and we don't really get taught from a human perspective. We don't have a lot of people with disabilities regularly teaching as part of medical curriculums.
Oh,
So I
yeah. I'm not a collection of symptoms. I'm a
Mhm.
person. God, if a doctor says to me, how's work? How are the kids? Simple, polite, nothing, but it means a lot to me. I am a whole person. I'm complex. I'm not just a checklist of symptoms.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like to ask people about their families or, like, what they like to do for fun, people's pet
Uh-huh.
names.
It means a lot, I think.
So, Disability Pride does a fantastic job of highlighting unsung heroes in the disability rights movement. The meticulousness of the research that went into compiling these stories feels very powerful. It's like a huge leap forward for the disability justice movement to have all of these things kind of appreciated, at least in this one source. Did it feel big while you were writing it? Were you learning things that you didn't know about the movement?
Oh, yeah. That's really why I wrote it. When I realized I'd gotten away from the activist community. I mean, I got married, we had kids. I've been living my life, and I didn't understand. I even thought maybe the younger generation had grown complacent and there was no activism. But I was wrong. So I
They
had to
didn't.
learn try to understand from talking to people and reading what they'd written. And in the book, I tried as much as possible to always have things in other people's words from their mouths or their writings. If I couldn't talk to them personally, I would go by other, things they'd written or interviews they'd done. But I tried to interview as many different folks as I could, particular emphasis on those under 40, say, who had come of age with the ADA or after it passed, to get a sense, a snapshot of what was going on for these for me, younger. I mean, I'm 61 now, and I remember life before the ADA, but I didn't really have a strong understanding of, where the movement or movements, plural, where they are today. And there's a lot going on.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I really loved your discussion in chapter 14 about the next steps for the movement and the questions of who will represent the movement moving forward. I've heard time and time again, disability is not a monolith, right? There's lots of diversity within disability. So
Ah,
still, there are going to be quintessential advocates or, core advocates, and what will they look like? It's kind of exciting that disability represents so many other intersections of marginalized people.
yeah, and I guess any movement goes through this. LGBTQ people. Once upon a time, it was all gay white men who had the spotlight. Civil rights movement, it was mostly black men. Disability community is diverse, and it should not just be white guys in wheelchairs like me.
You're paving the way. Do you have any, younger advocates in the movement that you're very excited about or that you enjoy following?
Oh God, don't ask me to name names. I'll leave somebody out. But there are a lot. I learned from them, learned to understand and see perspectives outside my own. which I found very valuable.
That is very in the spirit of the movement, sharing and learning from each other's experiences. And I love that even as an elder in the disability advocacy movement, you're still showing by example that you're always still learning. If you want to hear more conversations like this, hit that like button and subscribe to Disability Clinic for more accessible and inclusive education. Until next time, thank you for watching, listening, and learning.
I'm not sick, but I'm